and hello good people of the internet. It is I, Tommy Kelly, and this is Adventures in Woo Woo. And in this episode, I want to talk a bit about the whole notion of true will in the kind of magic sense. Yesterday, I watched The Mindscape of Alan Moore, which is a documentary that I think is from 2006. For some reason, I have that in my head. May or may not be. It's certainly over a decade old anyway. And it's a jaunt, a very happy jaunt, well-made documentary through Alan Moore's literal, his mind and the thoughts and writing, a bit of his history. But most of it is kind of composed of his understanding or his theories around magic and magic being art and creativity and his whole notion of idea space and all of these things. It's a wonderful documentary. You should check it out. Anyway, in the middle of that, he talks about this idea of true will, and that when you're following your true will, in effect, what you're doing is following the will of the universe, and therefore you can't be doing anything wrong. So I put this quote up on Facebook, and for the most part, fine. Everyone's kind of, it's a cool little quote from Alan Moore. You can't do wrong. Nice little, complete Alan Moore meme. But one person in particular just kind of pointed out, and I had a kind of discussion around it. And this was the thing I was talking about the other day in one of the other videos, where I kind of, I had an insistence in me that was that I wanted to be right in this, and we both kind of ended up, we were talking about the same thing, but I was just, I don't know, for some reason this was one of the things that I mentioned in the other video, that I started noticing the edges were coming off a bit on me, and I had to chill out a bit. But I sorted it out in the end, and everyone was happy. But the concern, and I think it's a legitimate concern, is that people can use the idea of true will to kind of justify any shitty behavior they want. But my kind of response to it was that, well, then they're not doing their true will, But I suppose there is a separate then retort to that, in that who is to say that the will of the universe is a nice thing anyway? We just kind of have this benevolent idea of the universe being, good and wholesome and, has everyone's interests in heart. And I think for the most part, having that kind of attitude, the chaos magic thing of acting as if that's true, you certainly have a much better experience of living in the world if you feel that it's, it's a benefit to you rather than a kind of, hostile to you. But it's like we've just decided, in the sense that if you can do no wrong, as Alan Moore says, if you're in alignment with the will of the universe, because we are part of the universal soul and this kind of thing. But Mother Nature is a nasty, nasty kind of energy, or a system or whatever. It seems kind of animistic in nature, but it's just we as humans like to personify things and that. But it's like a fairly doesn't give a shit about people, or things, and it does whatever it does, regardless of the suffering involved. Now, it also does feed everyone on the planet. It also does supply, all the water and all the sunshine and all the good things too. But there is, no question that there's definitely a darkness to Mother Nature. So therefore, we have to say there's a darkness to the universe too. So that even being in line with your true will is not to say necessarily that you will be a good person or be perceived as doing good things. Because maybe the true will of someone is to be a shithead. And this is slightly different, I think, than someone using it as an excuse to be a shitty person or to do shitty behavior or whatever. I think it is different, in that you could use anything as your excuse in that kind of a way. In that, it's my economic background that made me. It's because of the political climate. It's because it's the end of the world or whatever. It's because I've been cooped up in my house for the last month, and this is why I'm shitty to my kids and my family or to people surrounding me, whatever. It's like it's another tool you could use as a justification to be a bad person. But I don't think that's kind of just unique to this idea of true will. I think you could in fact use anything to justify it. And so when that's leveled at that kind of notion of true will, that it's dangerous because people could use it as a justification for shitty behavior, my kind of response always to that, and this is the bit I couldn't get across without being antsy about it, is that you could literally do anything. You could pick anything you want and it would have the equal kind of danger to it of people being able to justify shitty behavior. Anyway, I think I've laboured that point enough and probably not explained it well enough as what was happening with my friend. But then the whole thing of that, just because you are following, if you get that you actually are following your true will, then it still doesn't mean you're going to be a good person. Like, you would have to ask the question, was someone, and I know as soon as you mention Nazis that the argument is over, but let's invoke Goodwin and say thanks very much, but we're going to do it anyway. Like, was Hitler following his true will? Like, it would seem someone who had such a massive impact on the world or something like that, from an occult point of view, and there's many, many kind of conspiracy things, whatever, about Hitler and Germany and the Nazis and all that kind of stuff. But you would assume that if there's a great kind of plan, then that in some way must have been part of the plan. And you kind of, when you get to those type of thoughts, that you're on very kind of, hairy ground morally. But it's an interesting kind of thing to kind of consider, that we're okay with kind of predetermined stuff, which in a sense true will is a predetermined, there is a plan for you, there is a reason why you're here, but it's not quite predestination or predetermination, because there is the kind of notion that you mightn't be following your true will. You mightn't find out what your true will is. You might fail in following your true will, or you might go along, you mightn't like the idea of your true will, and so that even though there is a plan for you, you might spend your whole life doing something else. And part of the work, of course, of magic and the great work is the discovery of your true will, if you buy into this notion of true will, which a lot of people don't. So it's an interesting kind of thing. Do I feel there is such a thing as a true will? I think there's certainly an element of it that seems true to me, in the sense of that when I surrender, or when I let go of my kind of plan for me and my life, it seems to work out an awful lot better. And that's a bit kind of Oprah in the, don't swim upstream, swim with the kind of, in the direction that the water is flowing and all that kind of stuff. But there is something to it. There is something in the surrender to the greater that seems to work really well. But also at different times when I've made concrete decisions and affirmed my control of the world, that also has led to great things as well, which is like the opposite of the surrender thing. So it's probably just, depending on the situation, which is the ideal kind of way to do it. But I kind of do, in a sense, feel that there is a kind of some sort of plan, if, in my more woo kind of moments, or there is some kind of destiny or something. But I think it's quite a lot looser, and I kind of like the idea of true will in the sense of that, well, this is, what you have to kind of work on. This is your kind of thing you have to do, and you can choose to do it or not, or you can get sidetracked or whatever. But there's, this is a plan that you could follow if you want. In the same way, when you're writing a book and you have a character and you have a plot line coming out, and you throw the characters into the plot line, sometimes, and it's when the magic of the book happens or the writing happens, sometimes the characters decide they're going to do something completely different, even though you had decided what their true will was or their nature was, whatever. Once they become animated and their own kind of, in a sense, sentience to them, they can go and do anything else. And we're probably built like that. To, the universe is going, right, we'll put Tommy Kelly down there, here's my plan from it. He goes, what is he doing? What is going on there? That's not what, well, he might end up doing something interesting, so we let it go ahead. But then, the concern out of all of it is, of course, that when people do bad things, that we kind of have to be, I suppose, not... it's like when, like the whole thing I was saying about what Hitler thing is, that when people do bad things or something magnificently bad, terribly hideous, that it still in some sense could be them following their true will or the will of the universe, in the sense that Mother Nature is also cruel as well as loving, and nurturing is also very destructive. And that's not, that's not to say that I think Hitler was right for what he was doing or any of that kind of notions or whatever, but it's a thing that I kind of, it pokes at me a bit, in that we kind of have this idea that the universe or God has our best interests in heart. And perhaps sometimes they don't, or long term things that seem like a disaster right now end up being beautiful from years down the line and stuff like that. It's hard to know. So I don't really know what I think about true will, other than sometimes it seems true and sometimes it's not. And if it is a thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be a good person. Your true will could be to be a terrible person, to be a destructive person, to be, you know, a megalomaniac, a mass murderer, something. I don't, you know, it's something that if you are not privy to what the divine plan is, it seems like a terrible crime, a terrible thing. And even if it's for the greater good, it still, I would suggest, is a terrible crime. Like, there's no way that anyone could ever convince me that Hitler's actions are ultimately good because it led to some goodness or whatever in the divine plan or something. If that is the case, I would have serious issues with the divine plan and would want to have a word with God about why he would have to set up something so terrible in order. Like, I'm sure there had to be better ways to conduct himself than allow, you know, or for the need of something so destructive. But I, you know, who am I to say? I'm just a guy. I don't have access to the greater divineness. So from my perspective, it just seems terrible. It may not be, but I will not be convinced. There's no way I could be convinced anyway. And most kind of rational, sane people couldn't be convinced either, I would suggest. And then the final bit of it is that while people could use the kind of guise of true will to justify being a shitty person, I don't think that's a good enough reason to you know, dismiss it as a kind of an idea or a theory or label it as dangerous, because I think you could do that with nearly everything. You know, it's like that kind of thing of saying knives are great, you know, you can cut your food with it, you can open boxes, or go, yes, but, you know, murderers also use knives, so knives aren't that great. And you go, well, I mean, yeah, okay, but, you know, still, you can use a knife for your food and it's grand and it's cool. Anyway, I think I've sufficiently rambled there. So we leave it at that. Tell me what you think about the whole idea of true will, or, you know, that you're here for a reason, or there's some sort of plan, or there's some sort of notion that you can follow or not follow the thing that you were sent here to do, or is it all random? Is it all just, you know, do whatever you want? In the kind of the other kind of Crowley kind of well-known thing is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which seems, I suppose, on the surface to be incongruent with, you know, a true will kind of sense. But or perhaps I have the whole notion of true will completely wrong. Some more knowledgeable on Thelema or Crowley, or I assume the idea of true will predates Thelema as well. Fill me in on why I have it wrong, because, you know, as I say, I would like to know more about it. If I say anything wrong on these videos, please do correct me. Which, you know, being the internet, someone definitely will. Anyway, good people of the internet. Until our next adventure, be safe, be kind, be well, and may our best days be ahead.